That friendly smile from the person next door might look harmless, but sometimes appearances hide darker truths. Subtle patterns in a neighbor's behavior can signal that something is deeply wrong long before the danger becomes obvious. Many people dismiss these early warning signs as harmless quirks until it's too late. What makes an evil neighbor so concerning is not just their personality, but their access. Living right beside you means they see your routines, your comings and goings, even when your home is left unguarded. That closeness turns their strange actions into potential threats that demand your attention. The 5 signs we're about to cover are more than simple annoyances. They're behavioral red flags recognized by experts as indicators of hidden malice. When these signs appear together, the risk level skyrockets. Ignoring them could put both your safety and your family at risk. So, pay close attention. Some of these patterns may look small at first glance, but each one could be a piece of a much bigger and more dangerous puzzle. As you watch, think about what might already be happening right outside your own window. That overly curious neighbor who seems to know a little too much about your life might not be as harmless as they appear. The very first warning sign that your neighbor may harbor darker intentions is when their curiosity crosses into something far more unsettling. There is a difference between casual friendliness and obsessive surveillance. A good neighbor might wave when you come home, or notice if your mailbox fills up while you're on vacation. But a dangerous neighbor goes beyond that. They track your comings and goings with an almost scientific precision, as if your daily life is part of their personal study. Instead of noticing broad patterns, they collect details that no ordinary person should know. They don't just realize you head out in the afternoons, they know you leave at exactly 3:15 every Tuesday for your daughter's soccer practice. They don't just recognize family visits. They could tell you that your mother-in-law comes every second Sunday and stays 2 hours without fail. This isn't normal awareness. It's targeted observation. Often the way they gather this information seems deceptively harmless. They might strike up conversations that feel casual, but each question has an agenda. Do you travel much for work? What time do you usually get home? How long will you be away for the holidays? They may even disguise their probing as polite concern, yet the intent is to piece together a schedule of your vulnerabilities. Some go further, installing cameras that mysteriously point toward your front door rather than their own yard, or casually filming with a phone when your kids are outside playing. They'll justify it with excuses about security or property issues, but the truth is far more disturbing. This surveillance doesn't stop at curiosity. It becomes a blueprint for something worse. By mapping out when you're home, when you're alone, and when your guard is down, they prepare the conditions for whatever harmful plan they may have in mind. Real cases show that neighbors who eventually crossed into criminal behavior had often been monitoring their victims for months, sometimes even years. Like predators, they studied every move until the perfect opportunity appeared. And the danger isn't theoretical. Consider a woman named Sarah, who thought her neighbor was simply eccentric. One evening, she arrived home to find him wandering in her backyard, claiming he was retrieving a ball, except there was no ball. A few weeks earlier, she had caught him leafing through her mailbox. Before that, he was leaning over her car, running his hand along the paint and calling it admiration. Each moment could have been brushed off as odd but harmless. Yet when placed together, the pattern was chilling. If you notice someone paying this kind of disproportionate attention to your daily life, don't dismiss it. Keep a record of their questions, their behavior, and the times you catch them watching. What seems like excessive nosiness may in fact be the first stage of something far more dangerous. Because when someone treats your life as if it's their own private reality show, they aren't just being strange. They are laying the groundwork for something that could put you and your family at real risk. The second major sign that a neighbor may have harmful intentions is their constant disregard for your boundaries. This is not just simple rudeness or social awkwardness, it is deliberate testing. Each time they cross a line and you do nothing, they gain information about how far they can push you. They are probing step by step to see what they can get away with before you resist. And the dangerous truth is that every silent concession on your part encourages them to push further the next time. Boundary violations almost never start with something dramatic. These neighbors are calculating, and they understand that an immediate, obvious invasion would likely get the police involved. Instead, they begin with seemingly minor offenses that don't feel serious enough to confront. They cut across your lawn even though there's a perfectly good sidewalk. They lean over your fence and strike up conversations while you're trying to relax in your own yard. They knock on your door late in the evening with excuses that don't add up. Each small incident taken on its own might seem like nothing more than an irritation. But together, they create a pattern that is deeply revealing. The truth is that ignoring property lines, disregarding your personal space, or brushing aside your requests is not about being thoughtless. It's about dominance. These actions reveal that the person doesn't recognize your right to autonomy. They don't see you as someone to respect. Instead, they see you as someone to manipulate, someone whose tolerance can be tested. That is why these behaviors are not random. They are strategic. The escalation almost always follows a familiar path. At first, it's physical boundaries, stepping onto your property, touching things that belong to you, entering spaces without invitation. Then it shifts into personal boundaries, intrusive questions, inappropriate remarks, uninvited appearances. Eventually, if unchecked, it can reach the level of safety boundaries, following you, showing up in places where they have no reason to be, making you feel unsafe, even in your own home. At that stage, the invasion is no longer subtle, it is threatening. What makes this especially alarming is the psychology behind it. People who repeatedly break boundaries are not just looking to irritate you. They are actively conditioning you to accept their intrusions as normal, while conditioning themselves to ignore your humanity. They interpret your politeness as weakness, your hesitation as consent, and your tolerance as approval. This dynamic is extremely dangerous because it lays the groundwork for more serious offenses. Studies have shown that those who habitually cross boundaries in small ways are much more likely to escalate into outright criminal behavior. This is why it's critical to respond firmly the moment these patterns become clear. Keep a written record of every incident, including dates and what happened. Speak up directly and make your limits clear, even if doing so feels uncomfortable. Share your concerns with family, friends, or even local authorities if necessary. Remember, protecting your safety is more important than protecting someone else's feelings, especially when that person is intentionally undermining your peace. The earlier you act, the harder it becomes for them to normalize their invasive behavior. The third clear sign that a neighbor may harbor dangerous intentions is their use of intimidation and control as tools to manipulate those around them. This is not about someone losing their temper on a stressful day or venting frustration over a legitimate concern. This is intentional psychological warfare, carefully crafted behavior designed to make you fearful, submissive, and easier to dominate. Neighbors who rely on intimidation operate much like predators in the wild. They study their targets closely, learning what triggers fear and how to apply pressure until their victim feels cornered. They are highly strategic. They understand that a mother will be more unsettled if threats are directed toward her children. They know elderly neighbors are more likely to back down during a confrontation. They recognize that someone living alone can be isolated more easily and made to feel powerless. Their intimidation often begins with subtle but menacing nonverbal cues, standing too close during conversations blocking your path, so you can't leave, locking eyes in a way that lingers uncomfortably, tightening their jaw or fists, or adopting aggressive stances. Each movement is calculated to send a message you are not safe here. Once they have unsettled you physically, they escalate to verbal tactics. A normal discussion can suddenly become charged with raised voices, veiled threats, or warnings that sound protective, but carry an ominous edge. They may casually remark about how simple it would be for someone to break into your home, or remind you how unsafe the neighborhood has supposedly become. They might drop comments about accidents, burglaries, or violence that could happen to anyone not careful. On the surface, these words may seem like advice, but beneath them lies a darker purpose to plant fear and create compliance. What makes this behavior so sinister is its adaptability. If you attempt to resist by setting firm boundaries, asserting your independence, or calling out their conduct, they don't retreat. Instead, they escalate. The intimidation intensifies, and the underlying message becomes crystal clear. Resistance will only bring more pressure, more fear, more threats. Their goal is to condition you into believing that standing up for yourself is dangerous, while submission is the safer path. The link between intimidation and eventual violence is well documented. A person who repeatedly uses fear to control others has already crossed a moral line that most people would never approach. They are comfortable exploiting fear, and once that tool loses effectiveness, physical harm is often the next step. Property damage, direct threats, or repeated behavior that makes you dread being in your own home are signals that the intimidation has crossed into criminal territory. When someone uses fear as a weapon against you, they're not just being unpleasant or overbearing. They are revealing a dangerous mindset that has no respect for your safety, your dignity, or your rights. At that point, what you are facing is not merely a troublesome neighbor. It is someone who could easily become a threat to your life and well-being. The fourth disturbing sign that a neighbor may harbor malicious intentions is when they deliberately work to cut you off from your community and slowly tear down your reputation. This is not the usual neighborhood drama or harmless gossip that happens anywhere people live close together. What you're seeing here is a deliberate strategy, a methodical effort to weaken your social support and leave you exposed. By dismantling your reputation, they remove the allies you would normally have if their hostility escalates into something more dangerous. The process often begins quietly, almost imperceptibly. A neighbor like this doesn't march into the community shouting accusations. They start with carefully crafted conversations. They retell ordinary interactions with you in distorted ways, weaving suspicion into their words until harmless moments sound like proof of bad behavior. They drop subtle hints that you're rude, difficult, or inconsiderate. Over time, these small distortions form a narrative that casts you as the problem neighbor. The insidious part is how believable they make themselves appear. Their stories are delivered with just the right tone of concern, as if they're reluctantly sharing information for the good of the community. In many cases, they even flip the script completely. If you've ever confronted them about their own behavior, they twist the memory and tell others you threatened them or made them feel unsafe. This reversal of roles is particularly effective because it paints them as the victim and you as the aggressor. Suddenly, you're not just misunderstood, you're seen as dangerous. The strategy isn't random. Malicious neighbors don't waste their efforts whispering to just anyone. They identify the most influential people in your area, the ones whose opinions carry the most weight. That could mean long-term residents, everyone respects community leaders, or even parents who coordinate local events. By turning these figures against you, they set off a chain reaction. Once those key voices start doubting your character, others tend to follow without questioning the details. The results can be devastating. You begin to notice subtle but painful changes. Neighbors who once smiled warmly at you now avoid eye contact. Invitations to block parties, barbecues, or school activities stop arriving. Parents who once encouraged their kids to play with yours suddenly make excuses. A chill settles over every interaction until one day you realize you've been completely excluded from the very community that used to feel like home. This isolation is not accidental, it's part of the plan. By cutting off your connections, your neighbor ensures that when they escalate their hostility, you will have no one to turn to, no allies, no witnesses, and no support. Victims who are isolated this way are easier to intimidate, easier to silence, and easier to harm without anyone stepping in. Families suffer deeply under this tactic. Children lose friendships through no fault of their own. Spouses face cold shoulders at social gatherings. Whole families become outsiders branded with a reputation they never earned. What makes this sign so sinister is that it attacks more than just your image. It attacks your safety net. A person who deliberately dismantles another's reputation in order to leave them vulnerable has revealed something profoundly evil about their character. This is not just petty drama. It is psychological and social sabotage, and it requires a firm response. The best defense is to be proactive. Document every falsehood you hear, track its source, and calmly address it with those who are willing to listen before the lies spread beyond repair. Most importantly, recognize that this pattern is not going to stop with gossip. It is part of a larger escalating plan, and preparing yourself now could protect you from what comes next. The fifth and final sign that your neighbor may harbor truly dangerous intentions is escalating anger and hostility directed towards you. This behavior is not the result of ordinary stress or someone having a few rough days. What you're witnessing is a progression, a steady conditioning of their mind toward violence with you as the target. Each outburst trains them to cross one more line, to erode one more internal barrier, until harming you no longer feels unthinkable. The pattern usually begins quietly, almost in ways that seem excusable. At first, they may simply appear impatient or easily irritated, snapping over minor inconveniences. But soon, their reactions grow louder and more aggressive. A simple disagreement about parking noise or property boundaries transforms into a shouting match. What once would have been a moment of frustration turns into hostility that lingers for days, sometimes weeks. Their words are no longer just angry. They're crafted to humiliate, to intimidate, to make you shrink back. Veiled threats slip into conversations, threats they later excuse as just venting. But the intent is unmistakable to make you afraid. Then, their aggression often takes on physical form, though at first, it hides behind plausible deniability. Plants mysteriously wither after they complained about your yard. Your car suffers scratches that just happen to appear after an argument. Mail disappears or shows up damaged. Items in your yard are broken or missing in ways that are too coincidental to ignore. Each act may be small enough to explain away, but together they reveal a calculated escalation. When intimidation through words is no longer enough, destruction of property becomes the next weapon. And once property is fair game, personal safety is never far behind. Written intimidation often follows close behind. Notes slipped under your door, letters on your windshield, anonymous messages that sound like warnings but feel like promises of harm. Each communication is meant to remind you that they are watching, that they have power, and that resisting will only make things worse. These aren't random outbursts. They're rehearsals, each step breaking down more of their hesitation about physical violence. The psychology here is chilling. Every explosion of anger chips away at the normal restraints that keep most people from harming others. Each incident without consequences emboldens them. Minor frustrations morph into major confrontations. Raised voices evolve into direct threats. Property damage shifts into personal harassment, and personal harassment eventually leads to physical attacks. Whether this takes weeks, months, or years, the trajectory is tragically predictable. The signs that someone has crossed from merely difficult to genuinely dangerous are clear anger that is wildly disproportionate to the trigger, hostility that lingers far longer than normal conversations that turn into threats about teaching you a lesson or making you pay. At this stage, you are no longer dealing with a problematic neighbor, you are facing someone capable of real harm. This is when protecting yourself becomes urgent. Every incident must be recorded, dates, times, what was said or done, and who witnessed it. Documentation is your shield. The evidence you will need to prove to authorities that the danger is not imagined, it is real. And this step should never wait until after violence occurs. Authorities must be involved before the situation crosses into life-threatening territory. By recognizing this fifth sign, you now hold an advantage most people never have: the ability to see danger forming before it erupts. You can identify surveillance before it hardens into stalking. You can confront boundary violations before they become full invasions. You can detect intimidation before it escalates into assault. You can resist social isolation before you lose your support system. And most importantly, you can act on escalating aggression before it ends in violence. Rarely do these signs appear alone. A truly dangerous neighbor will display multiple red flags because their psychology drives them to harm in more than one way. The more signs you notice, the more urgent the danger becomes. When you see all five together, you are not just dealing with a bad neighbor, you are dealing with a genuine threat to your safety. At this point, the most important thing you can do is trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it almost certainly is. Never allow fear of seeming overreactive to silence your voice. Your safety and your family's well-being must come before anyone else's comfort. Ignoring these signs after recognizing them is not caution, it is recklessness. Knowledge without action is useless. You now understand the red flags that warn of evil intentions, and that knowledge could save lives. The decision rests with you. Take it seriously, protect yourself, and continue learning. On your screen right now is the next resource chosen for you. A video that builds on what you've just discovered and equips you with even more tools for protection. Don't dismiss it. Don't put it off. Click now and strengthen the defenses that could one day make the difference between safety and tragedy. Evil rarely announces itself at the door. Instead, it creeps in through patterns, watching your every move, crossing your boundaries using intimidation, tearing down your reputation, and finally escalating into outright aggression. Each sign on its own may seem small, even excusable, but together they paint a picture that can't be ignored. Recognizing these patterns isn't about living in fear. It's about staying awake, alert, and ready to protect yourself and the people you love. The truth is, most people never notice these warnings until it's too late. But now you know them. You have the ability to see danger forming before it strikes. You can cut off manipulation before it grows into violence. And you can choose strength instead of silence. So I want to hear from you. Have you ever seen any of these signs in your own life? Share your thoughts below. It may help someone else. And don't forget to subscribe for more Stoic wisdom and life-saving insights.